Welcome to my class. In this particular video session, we will talk about language translators. There are a number of language translators. The first one is assembler, second one interpreter, and the third one is compiler. So let's move on to language translators. First of all, we will try to understand the meaning of language translator. We can represent data in alphabets, that is A to Z, in numbers, that is from 0 to 9, and in special symbol, that is at the rate, hash sign, dollar sign, percentage sign, and sign, etc. In combination, they are termed as characters. So if we combine alphabets, numbers, and special symbols, then they are termed as characters. It appears to us that computer can understand alphabets, numbers, and special symbols because we input data only in this form, and the computer also generate output only in this form. So it appears to us that computer understands our language. However, computer cannot understand our language. In reality, we see that computer cannot understand our language directly. Now look, computer works with the help of electricity. Therefore, computer understands the language of electricity. Electricity has two phases, that is on or off. When the circuit is established, it is on position. When the circuit is disconnected, this is off position. Anything which is represented by two phases, that can be termed as binary. So we understand one thing, electricity has two phases, either it can be on or it can be off. So anything which has two phases, it can be termed as binary. Now we can say that electricity is represented by binary, that is 2. Electricity is represented by binary phases, that is 2 phases. We started using 2 digits to represent these 2 phases. On state and off state can be represented by digits. On is represented by digit 1 and off is represented by digit 0. Therefore, electricity can be represented by binary digits. Binary means 2 digits. So electricity can be represented by binary digits. We take out VI from binary and we take out TS from digits and combine them to make it bits. We take out VI from binary and TS from digits, and the moment we combine them, it makes a bits. So we can say that electricity can be represented by bits. When we enter data in character form, a program inside the computer converts these characters into electrical signals. These electrical signals are in the form of on and off. These electrical signals are represented in digital form, that is 0 represents off and 1 represents on. Here you can again see that the moment this circuit is connected, it becomes on. The moment it gets disconnected, it becomes off. On is represented by 1 and off is represented by 0. The program which converts English written characters into binary digits, that is in binary language, that is in 0 and 1's form. It is termed as Language Translator. So Language Translator is a program which converts English written characters into binary format. So the program which converts English written characters into binary format, that program is termed as Language Translator. The three terms, first one binary language, second one machine language, and the third one low level language. All these means one and the same thing. Whether we talk about binary language, machine language or low level language, it means one and the same thing. There are three types of language translators. The first one is assembler. The second one is interpreter. And the third one is compiler. The basic purpose of all these translators is to convert English written words into binary language. Let us talk about these three terms one by one. The first one is assembler. A program written in assembly language program must be translated into its equivalent machine language program before it can be executed on the computer. So all those programs which are written in assembly language, they are converted into machine language, they are converted into binary language by a program, and that program is termed as assembler. This translation is done with the help of a translator program known as assembler. So the job of assembler is to convert the program written in assembly language into its equivalent machine language program. The assembler program for a computer system is a system software, and it is supplied by manufacturer of the same computer. Microsoft Assembler Program MASM and Borland Turbo Assembler Program TASM are two popular assembler programs. With the help of these two programs, the programs written in assembly language, those programs can be converted into binary or into low level language. The second one is interpreter. An interpreter is a translator. It is a program used to convert programs written in high-level language. High-level language means English language. An interpreter is a translator. Interpreter is a program used to convert programs written in high-level languages. High-level languages means those programs which are written in English language. Interpreter converts high-level language program into machine language instruction and then immediately executes the machine language instruction. Let us take up an example to understand the meaning of this line. Suppose we have a source code which is written in high-level language. We have a source code program in which we have number of source code lines. Interpreter will read the very first line. Interpreter will convert the very first line into machine understandable language and send it to CPU for execution. Then the interpreter will read the second source code line. It will read it, it will convert it, and then again send it to CPU for execution. When we say convert it, it means converting this particular English language into machine language. Then it reads the third line, the third source code line. It reads it, it converts it into binary language and then send it to CPU for execution. So interpreter is a program which reads line by line, and after reading line, it converts it into machine language. After converting it to machine language, it sends it to CPU for the execution. Interpreter converts one line of high-level language into machine understandable form and executes it. then the next line gets converted and executed, and so on. As instructions are translated and executed simultaneously using interpreters, they are slow for executing large programs. If there is any syntax error means we have written some wrong command. In that case, it stops the translation process at the very same place. It will not move ahead. It will stop as it is there. Now let's move on to the compiler part. Compiler is a translator. Compiler is a program that translates a program written in high-level language into machine language before executing it. So, compiler is a translator. Compiler is a program that translates a program written in high-level language, that is in English language. It converts it into machine language before executing it. Before executing it means before sending to CPU. It reads the whole program, it converts it into machine language, and then send the whole program to CPU for execution. But in the case of interpreter, you have seen it. Interpreter does not read the whole program. Interpreter goes line by line. Whereas compiler reads the whole program, it will convert the whole program into machine language, and then the compiler will send the whole program to CPU for execution. Let's take up an example to understand the functioning of compiler. In the source code, there are a number of lines. The very first line, it will read. The second line, it will read. The third line, it will read. And there are only 3 lines in the source code. It means the compiler shall read the 3 lines together. The compiler shall read these 3 lines one by one. Compiler will convert these 3 lines into machine level language. And then the compiler will send the complete 3 lines to CPU for execution. In this case, we are assuming that in the source code, we have only 3 lines. Compiler reads the 3 lines which are written in English language. Compiler converts it into binary language. Then the compiler sends the whole program, whole source code, which consists of 3 lines, to CPU for execution. In case there is some syntax error, even in the last line of the program, it will not allow the compilation of the whole of the program. Therefore, the source program must be free of errors before it is compiled. It means there should not be any error in the coding part. If there is some error even in the last line, then compiler will not compile it. It means we cannot go ahead with the conversion form. We cannot go ahead with the translation of English language into binary language. If the program is error free, only then the compiler will convert English written characters into binary language. So therefore the source program must be free of errors before it is compiled. Here you can see in this particular photograph, some coding is given to us. Compiler will read the whole coding, it will compile, and it will send the result to CPU for execution. This program is written in English language. Compiler converts this English written program into 0 ones and send the whole program to the CPU for execution. Now let us move on to the difference between interpreter and compiler. Distinction between interpreter and compiler. The first one is interpreter translates one statement of the program at a time. Whereas compiler is concerned, compiler reads the entire program and translate into machine code at the same time and send it to CPU for execution. Second point, interpreters usually take less amount of time to analyze the source code. However, the overall execution time is comparatively slower than compilers. Interpreter takes less time because it has to read only one line, one source code line, and convert it into binary form. So it has to read only one line, so it will take less amount of time to analyze the source code. So far compilers are concerned, compilers usually take a more amount of time to analyze the source code because the compiler has to read the whole code, whole source code it has to read, and then it has to convert it into binary form and then send it to CPU. But the overall execution time is comparatively faster than interpreters. So compiler takes more time to analyze the source code, but it takes less time in the execution of the code. Third point, interpreters do not generate any intermediate object code. Compilers generate intermediary code called object code or machine code. Interpreters execute conditional control statement at much slower speed, but compilers execute conditional control statements like if-else faster than interpreters. Here if-else statements, they are considered as conditional control statement. Fifth point, interpreter runs the program from the first line and stops execution if it encounters an error. It will stop if some error is found. It will not move ahead after that point. Whereas compiler programs does not allow a program to be run until it is completely error-free. Even in the last line there is some error, this compiler program will not send the code to CPU for execution. Sixth point, in the case of interpreter, errors is reported as soon as the first error is encountered. Rest of the program will not be checked until the existing error is removed. So it means the moment an error is spotted, the interpreter will stop functioning. In the case of compiler, errors are displayed only after the whole program is checked. It means the compiler will read the whole program. If there is error or there are number of errors, then it will display all the errors after reading the whole program. But the interpreter, after finding the first error, it will stop. Seventh point, whenever interpreter starts, every time higher language program is converted into lower language. That is, English written program is converted into binary or machine language. But in the case of compiler, program need not be compiled every time. It is compiled in the very first time, and after that there is no compilation required. Eighth, debugging means locating and removing the errors. Debugging is easy because interpreter stops at the line where an error is reported. It means the user comes to know the interpreter has stopped functioning, so the error must be on the very same line. In the case of compiler, compiler will read the whole program and it will display all the errors at the end. So in the case of compiler, debugging is difficult enough. So we can say compiled language is more difficult to debug. Ninth point, programming languages like JavaScript, Python, Ruby use interpreters. Whereas in the case of compiler, programming languages like C, C++, Java, these languages use compilers. Thank you very much.